bodied one.
Challenging. Good
Thanks
work.
for the cranial spike.
I will be giving. Never mind. Fucking DMT Cammy.
Hello friends and welcome to the video. Today is a Dead Man's Tale review. We were introduced to this exotic scout rifle last season, and since then, it has risen to be one of our strongest primaries. The reason for this is because although it is a scout rifle and scout rifles are not a popular pick, it has accurate hipfire at 150 RPM with the previous 120 hand cannon RPM damage model, meaning it hits 84 damage to the head and 46 to the body at a blistering, and I have to repeat this, 150 RPM. Keep in mind that hand cannons got nerfed from 150 to 140 RPM and they hit less damage from the head and they do not have accurate hip fire. That alone makes it sound like Dead Man's Tale is already the strongest option, yet there are even more bonuses associated with the gun, like Cranial Spike. By landing headshots, you get more damage. It stacks all the way to 5 times, with 97 damage to the head for a 2-tap on some resiliences, and 56 to the body, meaning at the very worst you're going to 1 head, 2 body your opponent, again at 150 RPM from the hip. You can aim down sights, which makes it easier to land shots at those extended sight lines, so it works double duty. It's a hand cannon from the hip and a scout rifle while aiming down sights. But wait, that's not all. For some reason, I don't know why, this gun has random rolls similar to Hawkmoon. I thought that was supposed to be something specific to Hawkmoon's identity. However, it is what it is, and out of all the random roll perks that exist, there is only one important perk, arguably two. The arguable one is Snapshot, where you can make it from the hip to aiming down sights faster, which means you can use the dual nature of the gun more specifically. The real important perk right here is Vorpal Weapon, meaning you do extra damage to supers. You heard that correctly. You normally 3-tap an opponent, well, you get to 3-tap supers. Doesn't matter that they have damage resistance, you can still TTK them. So now that we've been through a brief overview of this weapon, let's talk specifics. So first of all, where do you get this? Well, you get it from the Exotic Presage quest. Do a normal mode, then I think you do hard mode for the catalyst. Someone fact check me below. It's been so long since I obtained this. Then you complete the catalyst and now you have accurate hipfire on this scout rifle. Then, once per week per account, not character, you can get another random roll of Dead Man's Tale by simply completing the quest again. It doesn't matter if it's normal or hard. So now that you know where to obtain it, let's talk specific damage numbers. This is going to be a knowledge dump. So the first thing we need to know is talking about the random roll, what do we go for? Do we prioritize range? Do we prioritize stability? Maybe these stats will help you. At 68 range, it has a 42 meter hipfire damage drop-off with a 74 meter aim down sights damage drop-off. At 86 range, which is the max range, it has a 45 meter hipfire damage drop-off, which is a 3 meter improvement over the other, and a 79 meter aim down sights damage drop-off, which is a 5 meter improvement over the other. So in my opinion, while range does contribute to the overall hit detection of the weapon, you only gain 3 to 5 meters of damage drop-off, and this is a scout rifle. So on the majority of maps, you won't even experience damage drop-off to begin with, even on a roll of this with no range. If you opt for the stability route, which is the one I went for, you experience less bloom, meaning if you rapidly fire at 150 RPM, your second, third, fourth, and fifth shot will not bloom as wildly, which means they become more inaccurate the faster you shoot. But if you wait for a second to let the bloom reset, it will go back to initial accuracy. So stability helps you reach that initial accuracy faster, and it mitigates the bloom effect from shot to shot. Another stat to keep in mind is the recoil direction stat, which is normally hidden unless you view it on an item manager application. So you could go for arrowhead break as the barrel, chambered compensator, or extended barrel. There's also a stock option called fitted stock, which adds recoil direction. So you could go with something like fluted barrel plus fitted stock to get the 100 recoil direction. Chambered compensator and extended barrel will bump it to 99, which is almost perfect and, in my opinion, good enough. The recoil direction stat governs how vertical the recoil will be and how little horizontal deviation from shot to shot. So having it at 100 means it's going to feel mostly straight up and down. The final stat to mention is handling, which contributes to how quickly you can aim down sights, as well as ready and stow speed, meaning if you shoot somebody with a special weapon, how quickly you can clean up with Dead Man's Tail. In my opinion, on most weapons, handling is the most important stat, but on Dead Man's Tail this is an exception since your consistency on shooting the weapon comes from stability and range. So you would think that you have to make a tough choice between choosing between each of these stats, but you really don't. In my opinion, here are two roles that give you most of everything. This is the stability-centered one, which is chambered compensator, high caliber rounds so you can flinch sniper rifles, and hand-laid stock for extra stability, coming out with 68 range, 55 stability, 50 handling, and 99 recoil direction. Or you could go with the handling version, which is fluted barrel, high caliber rounds, fitted stock, at a stat line of 68 range, 50 stability, 64 handling, and 100 recoil direction. You can be very flexible with this, and honestly at the end of the day, you can only get so many rolls of this, so whatever you get is probably good enough. I want to specifically mention the magazine perk options. The three competitive ones in my opinion is armor piercing, high caliber, and ricochet. Ricochet is the obvious choice, because having extra range and stability means more consistency, and at the end of the day, landing a shot is better than the chance of causing flinch. However, personally, I hate dying to flinch so much that I will always default to high caliber rounds. Next up is the armor piercing round, and this is a fringe choice, but it does come up, and I have made plays with this in the past, where I freeze a target with stasis and then armor pierce through the frozen target to hit an opponent behind their frozen comrade, and I find that hilarious, and the option of that existing is good enough to try it and a blast to do. Now let's talk about the main perk 1. There are going to be 3 bad options, 3 pretty good options, and 1 fantastic option. The 3 bad options are subsistence, outlaw, and 4th times the charm. If you PvE with this gun, sure, they're great. In PvP, however, the 3 pretty good options is killing win, which is a range and mobility boost just for getting a kill, moving target, which is more aim assist when aiming down sights. You do not actually have to be moving for that aim assist to proc, and then snapshot, which helps you transition from the hip to aiming down sights. And out of what I've listed so far, I think snapshot would be my main choice. However, the final option, which is Vorpal Weapon to be able to kill supers, is the absolute best option since you should be aiming from the hip anyway. To be specific, without Vorpal Weapon, you will be hitting a super for 40 damage to the head and 23 depending on how much damage resistance they have. But with Vorpal Weapon, you will hit them for 66 and 36, which means that as you stack Cranial Spike for landing headshots, you can just 3-tap them right off the rip. With that being said, now you understand where to obtain the weapon and what role to go for. Let's talk about the specifics of Cranial Spike. So it normally does 84 damage to the head and 46 to the body. At 1 stack of Cranial Spike, so 1 headshot, it moves to 86 to the head, 48 to the body. On screen now, you see exactly how much damage it does, depending on how many times you have activated Cranial Spike. At an opponent with 6 resilience, this is your precision ratio. It is always head, head, body. And if you're starting the gunfight with 2 stacks of Cranial Spike, then you can head, body, body, since the first headshot will equal Cranial Spike 3. If you land enough headshots to make it to Cranial Spike 4, then you can 2-tap an opponent at 6 resilience. Keep in mind that these days people run the Stag Exotic Warlock helmet, which gives you damage resistance in a rift, which means that it's going to take a lot of shots to kill them, which means you can farm Cranial Spike off someone standing in a rift, and then potentially 2-tap someone who is outside of that rift, assuming that you have your 4 stacks of Cranial Spike. So at this point in the video, we know where to get the gun, what role to go for, and how the gun works. Let's talk about builds that you can use to take advantage of Dead Man's Tail, and I have one that I run for each character. On my Titan, I use the Lion Rampant Exotic Boots, which allow for accurate hip fire in the air while your thrust is activated. So this means that I can use Dead Man's Tail, one of the deadliest weapons in the game, accurately from the air. That's kinda nuts. Similarly, my Warlock also specs into the same idea. It uses Top Tree Dawnblade with Starfire Protocol, which allows for 2 fusion grenades, which means I can consume one of my fusion grenades to float and accurately aim from the air, both down sights and from the hip. Finally, my Hunter utilizes the Khepri Sting exotic to turn my smoke grenade into on-demand wall hacks, which helps for pre-aiming my opponents and stacking up Cranial Spikes. If you check the video description below, you will see a linked gameplay video of each of those Dead Man's Tail builds. The final thing to mention related to builds is team builds. If you have a damage booster like Empowering Rift, Boots of the Assembler Lumina, Charge with Light, you can 2-tap with Dead Man's Tail. It was already the best option, but now that it can 2-tap, it's even better. So that's some food for thought. For the next portion of the video, I'm going to talk about general usage of Dead Man's Tail and why it is so powerful. You already know how it works, but let's talk about how to use it. It's a hipfire weapon, meaning that your radar is always up. You also do not have to deal with the aim down sight speed penalty. Since you're firing from the hip, you get the full speed of your movement, which means that you can be more evasive and peak shot even more aggressively. The biggest advantage comes to low sensitivity players like myself, who use the wider FOV as a way to get a better read on the situation, to keep up with a shotgunner flying behind you, etc. The elephant in the room is the input device that you play on. Are you a controller player or are you a mouse and keyboard player? Because the gun functions entirely different depending on what input device you use. On controller it's going to be less consistent, and on mouse and keyboard it's going to be very consistent. It is what it is. But the opposite could be said for the Last Word hand cannon, and I seem to enjoy using it on mouse and keyboard, and I have a review of the Last Word, which is like the analog of this weapon. So if you're interested on using a more aggressive Dead Man's Tail in close quarter spaces, then the Last Word is for you, and I have a review of it linked in the video description below. Overall, most of you already understood why Dead Man's Tail was this good, but I wanted to do a proper overview because I want to do some foundational videos that set the stage for future build crafting videos, where in that video I mention Dead Man's Tail and have a review ready to go so I don't have to spend an extra 12 minutes every single future video. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you all in the next one.